Welcome to Talks from the Essex Hotel with your hosts, Sarita Patel and Latham Woodward. The views expressed on this show are those of our guests and are not necessarily in line with our opinions, but can be. Please enjoy this program and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you. On today's show, we have Richard Habib from Alex Artisan Rugs in Mill Valley, California, an amazing guest and historian and educator about the woven arts. Enjoy the show. Artisan Rugs, and Alexander is a good friend of Sarita. Sarita, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Latham. It's great to see you again.
Well, it's always a pleasure, and you two have known each other quite a long time, and what I've learned from you, Sarita, in your amazing rug collection is Richard sold you quite a bit of these rugs, and he has an amazing depth of knowledge. Richard, I'm talking to you in the third person here, but I'd like to know something about the history of your, basically the art form that you sell.
Well, can I start by saying one thing? So Richard is the rug star. He is a rug star. He has provided not just me with the most incredibly beautiful rugs that make me inspired. They won't allow me to leave my house on time because I truly get inspired when I look down at the rugs. And they're not just rugs, they're fine art.
Wow.
And Richard and I have known each other for over 30 years. And he literally was my art historian educator on the art of the rug and tapestries. He taught me everything I needed to know. I still won't get through half of it, but I get really excited when it comes to Richard because not only did he provide a service and a product, but he literally is a little bit better than the college education I had. And I had a great college education.
I've only met Richard twice at his shop now, and I've got an education both times. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah. So I just had to preface that to
Thank
tell
you so much.
And he is my friend. He's somebody I adore.
Thank
I know
you.
everyone in his family. And he's been here in Marin for a long, long time. And people don't know just how well-rounded he is. But I always go back to, how did you get into this business? And, you know, how did you do that?
Well, first, thank you for the kind words, and thank you for having me here. I actually stumbled into the business back in 1977 in Laguna Beach area, and I was going to a yard sale that was advertised in a newspaper called the Penny Saver back then, and it was in Laguna Canyon. And I went to this sale, and it turned out that it was the remaining community of Timothy Leary's a community or commune, and one of the people had rugs for sale. And I didn't know anything about rugs at that point, but I was attracted to these two rugs that he had, and I paid $15 a piece for each of them. They were pretty worn, and I didn't even know what I was purchasing, but it turned out that they were late 19th century Caucasian carpets from the Caucasus, and I got home and hung both on my wall above my bed, and I got to enjoy them every day and became curious about these rugs. I didn't know if I had stumbled upon the original flying carpets I'd always heard about.
Wait a minute. So this was Tim Leary,
Timothy Leary.
Timothy Leary,
Yeah. Yes, who worked with Ram Dass back in the day.
Right.
Yeah.
So flying machines. Okay, so Tim Leary is Timothy Leary.
Timothy Leary.
And was he alive? He was alive?
He wasn't there when I was there. He was still alive, I believe, but he had moved up to the Bay Area. I think he was in Sausalito by then.
Right.
Yeah.
So you just stumbled. So I had to pause and break that up for a
Yes.
second because, you know, you didn't just stumble. It's like, you know, you probably were meant to be there.
I was meant to be there. I was looking for other things. I wasn't looking for rugs. That's why I say I stumbled upon them. But I did find a deep connection with those rugs, and they liked the experience you were uh, really articulating so well. I started to have a similar type of experience uh, looking at those rugs. They didn't make me late for work, but definitely were meditative in many respects. And shortly after that, about a year later, I started up my first company. It was called that. I just came up with the name. I built the company to fit the name. It was called the Thai Teak and Rug Company. That was my very first company, and I provided custom and exotic hardwood flooring to start out, and wall-to-wall carpet. And the clients that were calling me were people who own these huge palatial homes. And as I purchased the wood flooring, I was just starting out at very little capital, so I was purchasing the wood flooring as the requirement would come up, excuse me, over samples that I used. And then when the house was done, they would ask me if I could provide rugs. I knew nothing about rugs to speak of. And one client said, well, I want to hire you. Go find rugs for me. So I drove up to Los Angeles, went to a rug company called Agajon, and at the design center, and I wound up buying a couple of rugs, providing to the client, and continued my hardwood flooring business. And I received a call from someone who asked me if a dealer, a rug carpet dealer, rug dealer, if I would come see him and show him my wood flooring. So I did, and they were called the Hart brothers, Mark and Philip Hart. And before I left there, they asked me if I would merge my business with their business, which I did. And it turned out that they had recently taken in an American partner who was in Laguna Beach, and they asked me if I would oversee the Laguna Beach store because they didn't have a whole lot of confidence in that partner they took on. And while I was there, I met the cousin of Agajon of the Alulians family, and John Alulian turned out to be like the walking, living, breathing ultimate guru of rugs in Southern California at that time. I had no idea that's who had walked into the showroom and asked me if I had any rugs. And so I happened to that day have had one of the two rugs I purchased from Timothy Leary's people, and he liked it, and he said, what do you want for it? I said, I don't really know. Make me an offer. He said, I'll give you $100 for it. I said, oh, great. And I thought I scored. So it turned out that that rug ultimately had a wholesale value. This is in 1978 dollars of around $2,000 wholesale value, which meant at the retail level, it was probably double that amount. So I said, wow, this is really great. So I started looking for more rugs privately on the side and educating myself. There was knowledge out there, but not a lot of knowledge. There were some rug books that were put together by dealers, so there was a lot of more opinion than fact involved, and not too many people that had been doing research. But just by becoming engaged in that world, I started on my own journey of studying rugs and history. And the study of rugs is a study of history, of humanity, of geography, of ethnology, and there are touch points where archaeology plays a role in establishing the credentials of the origins of hand-woven rugs.
Yeah, and I'm glad you just said that, because I think what I really learned from you was less about, I mean, obviously you were outfitting us with rugs that would fit spaces and the decor, that's obvious. And we had all hardwood floors at the time too. But what you really did for me was you took the time out, because I was curious, to explain to me what the origin of the rugs were. And that basically included the history of humanity. And that's what put me on a lifelong quest of, always curious about how did these people get from here to here and what actually happened. And it is through the rugs. The rugs are like, artwork. They are woven art. They are telling the story of humanity. And so...
Can I butt in there too?
Yeah.
I have a question for Richard. So initially, although they're utilitarian, rugs are, how important do you feel in terms of historical context the art part of the practical is? Were they always intertwined, or did the art of the rug come after the practical, or was it just from the get-go?
It originated from practical because the oldest surviving evidence of a sophisticated woven carpet dates back to 500 BC.
Whoa.
And it's very sophisticated in terms of the structure of the rug and the design detail. In order to achieve that detail, they had to create for that time, for 500 BC, a very sophisticated approach to creating that rug, and even without a cartoon to copy from. But it was so sophisticated that it meant there had to be a history of weaving prior to that. And prior to that were very many nomadic cultures who utilized their flocks of sheep or goats to make carrying vessels for their grain, for their belongings, for their beddings, to create their yurts and tent bands. And so those were far more primitive, but they had to have been in existence for centuries before. But by 500 BC, there wasn't any other surviving fragments from that time.
There aren't any.
No, there are, from 500 BC on, there are various textiles that show up, but there's just little tiny fragments, and there's always debates about, even though they're C14 dated, and use other forms of measuring the age of those materials, they often are debated.
Mm-hmm.
They're not being hoarded somewhere by somebody.
No, they're just
Arab chic or something like that.
No,
Well, they
they're
could be.
kind of just found on archaeological digs, which the carpet that's known as the Patrick carpet, which is the carpet that dates back to 500 BC, was found in 1949 in the Altai Mountains of Siberia by Sergei Randenko, who is a archaeologist from Moscow, and he stumbled upon a tomb that the tomb raiders had looted already. It was actually a sarcophagi that they opened up, or that it was partially opened, and there was a skeletal remains of the former occupant or current occupant there. But there was no finery left, no jewelry, no clothing, nothing, but they left the rug. And the rug was preserved in permafrost for all those centuries, and it was mostly intact. So he had enough foresight to say, oh, this is interesting. Maybe it has some value. So he sent it back to the Hermitage at that time, which was it was still Leningrad. It had not been renamed St. Petersburg, its former name. And to this day, it still resides at the Hermitage in a glass-enclosed, climate-controlled case for all to see and view. Yeah. It has a procession of oxen going around what appears to be like a chessboard design in the middle of the field. It's primarily reds with greens, some ivories, some dark browns. and measures about 6 feet by 6 feet. But the fascination of that is it's apparently a Scythian carpet, which means it traveled 2,000 miles back in 500 BC to get to where it was, for one. And secondly, it really demonstrated how long of a weaving history had existed. It was a marker that, as you're going back to your question, that there had to be a weaving history prior to getting there. It's as if there was no Model T, no car industry, and suddenly a 450 SL is created. So you have to go through the whole essence of developing the concept of an automobile, and then to the earliest, most primitive automobiles, and over an evolutionary period of time to get to where the 450 SL would be, let's say, or the 550 SL. And here we have this carpet, which is equal to that in many regards. But the beauty of that is that carpet was woven before the time of Socrates, before the time of Plato, before the time of Aristotle, and before the time of Alexander the Great. So that's how old that is in a historical context.
Okay, for those of you who are listening at home right now, Richard does not have a textbook out.
No.
He's a wealth of knowledge. What was the Russian guy's name again?
Sergei Rendenko.
Sergei
Rendenko.
Now,
Rendenko.
Latham knows me, right? He's still getting to know me. But now you see how and why I go down the rabbit hole. Because I am around people like Richard, who when you start, the first thing I hear when you make the analogy of the rugs to the car is really critical. Because it says to me that the technology of the tapestry was either lost, hidden, but it was there. There was the technology. There's a pattern when you make a rug.
Well, it's perishable art,
right?
Which is the only reason that carpet survived, because it was in permafrost. Mm-hmm. Had it not been in permafrost, it most likely would have rotted away. Mm-hmm. So recently, about 3 years ago, there was some evidence of a woven sock that was found in northern Iraq, which was ancient Mesopotamia.
Mm-hmm. I think I saw a picture of that sock. I saw that recently.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
And that predates the Patrick carpet, according to a C14 study, by possibly, with a great deal of accuracy, 300 years, which would make it even earlier, like 800 BC. Mm-hmm. But that's it. So it's like this sock, that rug.
Well, this does take us down a rabbit hole, because Sarita and I have talked a lot about the destruction of the Great Library of Alexandria.
Yes.
And how, who knows what we knew, but someone didn't want that information to get out. It was purposefully destroyed. And
or hidden. We just don't know.
The secrets of the earth were destroyed.
Yeah.
So perhaps there was great things and samples, and who knows?
Yeah, who knows? I think a lot of it is, when powerful people or institutions get nervous about how powerful humans are. You can call us primitive or unprogressive, but the fact is humans are unbelievably powerful.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power,
yeah.
Which is maybe one of the reasons the contents of the library were withdrawn or hidden or destroyed, because if knowledge gets into the hands of the masses of the people, there's rebellion.
And you can't control them.
People have freedom of thought. And go, wait, you've been lying to me all this time. Right. I didn't, and now I know, and I want my rights, or I want my, what's due to me. So that's, part of that outcome.
So I have a question for you, Richard. Next question would be, to bring it in the present tense in terms of the educational process, what do you tell a new buyer to look for in a really nice tapestry, rug, carpet? What is the key for you, like for a beginning collector?
It depends what their woven. Let me back up a bit. Rugs are woven art, and just like all art, it's very subjective.
Sure.
So, what does that individual resonate with? There are different categories of rugs. There's your urban workshop rug, which are those very tightly woven, tightly knotted, very articulated designs that some people have that appeals to them.
Right.
Others are town carpets, which are a little bit more relaxed. They're semi-formal. Then there's village weavings, which are semi-primitive. And then there's tribal rugs, which are quite primitive, but can also be very sophisticated at the same time.
So it's a budget issue. It's a taste issue.
That comes into play. Usually, most people looking for a rug, it's like, I need this size. I like these colors. This is the design of my home.
Okay. Well,
And
let's forget about those people for a minute.
Yeah.
Because I want to focus on the art and the artistry of the piece, right? So from an artistry standpoint, what do you recommend someone does or looks for? I mean, I know that's a broad, it's a broad brush, right? But
That's a
It's a
good
broad
question,
brush.
and I think I don't think Richard really recommends unless somebody wants to be educated about what they're hanging. You know, I think mostly,
well, you're in business. I understand that, right? So you don't want to always put
yeah.
off your opinion, right?
Right.
If someone comes on and I need
See,
an
I'm
8 by
such
10,
a-
Richard.
I ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
I ask them, and occasionally there are very few collectors out there like there was when I started.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much a generational shift taking place.
Right.
So the collectors used to fall into, most part, a variety of categories. One would be a Turkoman collector, and another would be a Baluch collector. Another collected antique city carpets. I liked Caucasian carpets from the Caucasus. I like different types of Caucasian carpets. There are tribal rugs that are either Southwest Persian or Northwest Persian. Then there's rugs from the Khorasan region of Eastern Persia. There's rugs from all of the stands, which if your audience is not familiar with, stand means land of. So when you hear Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan, it means land of the Uzbeks, land of the Kazakhs. Those areas are all west of China and Western China, where all those stands are. And some of that culture bleeds into Western China, where there are carpets known as, say, Yarikans or Khotans. There are collectors for those types of rugs.
Right, so it's the identifier.
Tibetan rug collectors. So people choose different categories.
So what I learned just right now there is you can't lump them in together, obviously.
No.
So it's really about first appeal then. Appeal, right?
Yes.
Does it speak to you?
Yes.
Okay.
And
But, you know, he also said something about the generational shift, right?
Yeah, totally.
So that's happening right now. And I think we wanted to talk to Richard about this because, you know, knowledge doesn't have to shift a generation. It doesn't have to, you know, be taken out of our beingness. And so I think I've always thought that rugs and art were just an incredible way to revitalize the brain, you know, not just exercise and good food, but, you know, how do you inspire? How do you really spark that imagination to be curious about humanity, which I think then just sparks empathy. And we are such at a time right now where our empathy needs to be just, you know, broken open. And look at, we're sitting on a rug. I can't remember when I bought this, but all my rugs are very different because I was so curious about the world at large and what was coming out of different pockets.
Well, the rug you're sitting on right now is beautiful.
Yes.
I mean, for me, this is the kind of rug I love.
Me too.
It speaks to me.
19th century sumac.
Sumac?
Sumac from the Caucasus. This is from near the Baku region. And Baku is an island that juts out into the Caspian Sea. It's known sort of as an oil town, but in this century, a museum was built, a carpet museum of Baku, and the museum is shaped like a full rolled carpet. The roof line is quite interesting, and mostly they house Caucasian carpets from all over the Caucasus. And oftentimes, if I mention a rug in my showroom, as I've mentioned, I favor Caucasian carpets. Someone will say, why do you call those Caucasian carpets? Were they made by white people? And I say, no, because in the 19th century, a German professor, an anthropologist, happened to be in the Caucasus. And if you think about it, oh my gosh, mid-19th century, third quarter 19th century, how do you get there from Germany? So here's this German professor, and he's going through the Caucasus, and how the letter gets back to his colleagues in Munich is beyond me. I don't have those details. So he sends a letter back to his colleagues, and he says, the greatest example of the Aryan race I have found here in the Caucasus. You know how the Germans are obsessed with the Aryan race. So sends out letter back, and hence the term Caucasian stuck for for the Caucasian race, is equal to the white race. And the interesting aspect to that is the Caucasus is home to over 143 different ethnic groups of all variations there.
Isn't that fascinating?
Are they tribes? Tribal?
They're mostly mountain villages, a whole variety. So you have the Leskis, you have the people from Dagestan, you have the Armenians, the Georgians, you still have Kurds who got trapped on the other side of the Transcaucasian border when Russia and the ancient Persian Empire warred for a few centuries, and the Russians annexed the territory where the current border exists today. But there were nomadic Kurds roaming up and down the Caucasus that just happened to get stuck there and stayed there.
Is this somewhere you go to buy rugs?
No, I've never been there.
Sounds fascinating.
I want to go.
Yeah, it's
probably a little dangerous.
Interesting.
Right
There's Azerbaijani, Turks, all kinds of ethnic groups there. So you wonder, how do those people, when you put them all together, produce the greatest example of the Aryan race? It's quite. I've always found that quite fascinating.
That's a trip.
Yeah.
Well, it's not as dangerous as it was. The Azerbaijan-Armenian war has finally ceased after 35 years.
Now, what few people realize that area at one time, prior to the Persian Empire expanding there, had been occupied by the Mongols when they invaded Persia and Mesopotamia and that part of the world. One of Kublai Khan's cousins was the ruler of that area, and governed that area for about a century. Without much notice, a lot of the Mughal Empire just withdrew from that whole part of the world and headed back east, and then left this power vacuum. And they
left a power vacuum?
Like a power vacuum of who's going to rule the Caucasus, who's going to be the ruler in Persia, who's going to be the ruler in Mesopotamia. So this entire power vacuum started to get filled. And the way that a lot of the power was solidified was by various warlords or tribes banding together into little mini states. And then those states, depending on how strong they were and how many were in their population, expanded their power and ultimately started occupying different areas by ethnic groups.
And these same ethnic groups, do they have their own style of tapestry and carpet and rugs?
Yes.
So each one you can identify a group from their rugs.
You can identify almost down to micro aspects of the weaving, both by structure, sometimes color. By the structure, I mean the weft, the warp, the knotting technique, if it's asymmetrically knotted or symmetrically knotted, which also other words for that are Persian knotted, which is the asymmetric knot, or Turkish knotted, which is the symmetrical knot, also AKA Gordius knot.
And is there, just so I get all these things that I've been told all these years out of my head, did they use children a lot to knot, or women to knot because their hands were more delicate and small? Is that true?
It is and it isn't. Weaving is an indigenous art with many of these cultures up until, I would say, the mid-20th century. And the work that's done is not involuntary servitude necessarily. It's only in the last quarter of the 20th century that an awareness began to come about with the expansion of education. Many of those village dwellers felt like there's no way out unless my children are educated. So the handing down of the art form from mother to child, typically to women and young girls, started to dissipate. There are still pockets of weaving cultures that exist, like throughout Turkey in various areas, or definitely Afghanistan and Turkmenistan in various cities in Iran. But the weaving pool has been shrinking gradually. The art form does involve having a lot of dexterity to tie many knots. And of course, like in our century, or the last part of the 20th century, people developed what was referred to as carpal tunnel. Carpal tunnel can occur also by tying too many knots in a day, day after day, month after month, year after year.
Now, are there programs in these countries to foster these art forms and bring them back and preserve them, as far as you know?
There are some recently in the Caucasus, over in the area near Armenia and Georgia. A firm has been established called Rewoven. They're bringing the art form back. Dr. Brahmer, in the early 1980s, again, a German, a chemistry professor teaching at Marmara University in Turkey, had an interest in carpets and was traveling around Western Turkey and realized how the art form had really become degraded by modern materials, by machine-spun wool, synthetic dyes, and a lack of devotion to the art form. So he started a project, was called Return to Tradition. And Return to Tradition was the beginning of a renaissance of weaving, going back to the ancient roots of hand-spun yarn, organic dyes, and a devotion and dedication to the original art form. From that, it just took off. The next big firm that really inspired hundreds, Dr. Brahmer inspired maybe dozens. Woven Legends came from Dr. Brahmer, and Woven Legends inspired hundreds of companies to start pursuing that route.
That's amazing. And it's great because it's a heritage that needs to be preserved.
Yeah, it really is. And I think, like so many of the things that we're talking about, when humans occupy land and they are creative, artistic, making things that they need, that are shared, you get things like this tapestry, right? They're meant to last forever. We know they don't, but they are meant to last for as long as possible. And I think, thank God that they're trying to bring things back like this, because they also keep the longevity of life healthier, it seems, when it's not made for a mass marketplace.
Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit. I don't want to divert too much, but we're already 35 minutes into this interview, believe it or not. And
I told you.
I know, and it just goes so fast with somebody interesting.
Yeah.
I want to get back to so we've determined that there are programs to foster these industries and keep them going. What is a good argument for a young person? And I'm going to go back to this because I've got a daughter, you've got a daughter, she has a son. They're all about the same age. And from an investment standpoint, my rugs seem to go up in value. So they seem to be a repository of value also, rather than some garbage you get that's a throwaway item. Am I still correct? Are they still maintaining value, Richard?
No.
So,
Uh-oh.
okay, so, well, wait, I'm glad he said that, because this is where Richard and I have differing thoughts. Because you are in the business
Correct.
of selling these, that hasn't turned and turned back up. Fashion and style kind of goes cyclically, right? I thought that the rug market would be much higher by now than it is.
Well,
Because of what Latham just said. I mean, it's an investment to me.
there are a number of drivers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of them is generational, another is financial, where you have a generation where there's far less discretionary income available for the Generation Zs and the millennials to buy the $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 rug. And the last great wave that drove the antique business was the baby boomers. And there were a large generation, and baby boomers were aspirational in terms of trying to replicate wealth
Right.
and the look of wealth. So what this gets down to what you're asking. High demand and low supply. That was during the time of the baby boomers. And there was this huge renaissance in demand for hand-woven rugs because the underlying driver, oddly enough, from a decorative point of view, was a movement towards hardwood flooring and hard surface flooring, which people wanted to cover their, now they needed rugs. And so a whole variety of rugs sprung up. But wall-to-wall carpet prior to World War II was mostly wool, Axminster or Wilton, and was very expensive. So fewer people bought hand-woven rugs. And hand-woven rugs by dollars today were still fairly inexpensive. And only the wealthy could afford hand-woven rugs prior to that time. But what happened during the Second World War, a lot of the Allies and the Axis powers that had airborne forces, they ran out of silk for their parachutes.
Right.
And at least in this country, DuPont and Monsanto developed a product called nylon, which was synthetic silk.
Yeah.
Well, after the war ended, it's like, oh, we made this nylon. Now what are we going to do with it? They created wall-to-wall carpet, and they created new machines to manufacture it. So with all of the GIs coming back and all these homes being built to accommodate what was going on, and that began the baby boom, which is the baby boom generation, the next 25 to 35 years was all about wall-to-wall carpet.
Right, because it was formerly very expensive, and so everyone was
Now
like,
it's
I'm going to have that,
inexpensive
right?
and easy, and a lot of the homes being built, they had plywood floors put down.
Right.
So what's the easy way to cover? Wall-to-wall carpet, right? So now wall-to-wall carpet's going out of fashion, and this begins the movement towards hand-woven rugs from all these different countries, from Morocco and from Afghanistan. This is pre-Taliban, pre-communist Afghanistan. This is the time of the Shah in Iran. This is it's still the Russian Empire in the Caucasus, so not many carpets are coming out of Russia. But there's Turkey, and Turkey is being run by the military, and there's a lot of commerce going on around the world.
So let's stop there for a second. Okay,
Yeah.
I've been to Istanbul a couple of times. I'm stunned by the amount of carpets.
So many carpets.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Actually. It's just they're everywhere. Everybody's got a deal.
Yes.
Everybody's selling carpets. They're come have chai with me. You can sit down on the carpets.
Right.
Next thing you know, you got 4 carpets you can't afford to send back. But they're just everywhere.
Everywhere.
But like for instance, if you were a tourist, I wouldn't know what to do, I would know what to get.
A lot of
Right.
the carpets you will find in the bazaars in any of these countries are made for the tourist market. They're not that great. They're mass produced. There's a lot of production in terms of the people that control that part of the world. It doesn't mean that it's an expanding world. It's still shrinking,
Yeah.
the weaving world. But there's still enough people creating rugs, and rugs aren't a quick sell. They're not an impulse item. So people that made rugs 25, 30 years ago may never have seen the light of day. Even now, they might still be sitting in a warehouse somewhere in Hamburg, Germany, or New York City, or in London.
Just forgotten.
Just forgotten, and until there's a need. And what's happened is there's been this movement of repurposing many of those rugs. So the way they're repurposing them is chemically washing out all the color and then shaving down the pile
What?
so they look like worn out, colorless rugs. And that is what the generation that you're speaking of has more appeal to than the current full piled rugs or
So
mint
it's
condition rugs.
So
Barf.
one of those companies is called Ruggable,
Right.
right? And so at my house, on purpose, I have a Ruggable right
the
next
look.
to a rug, because I actually watch how people react to the rugs. And Richard is exactly correct. It's almost like there's a mechanism in the younger generation where they gravitate to. It's almost like a Xerox copy of a rug.
It is a Xerox copy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
But the technology has.
thank you for listening to Talks from the Essex Hotel. We strive to bring you interesting and different guests every week. Please like and subscribe to hear more content from Talks from the Essex Hotel. Until next time, see you then. This has been a recording of Talks from the Essex Hotel at Madmana Studios in San Anselmo, California. For more information, please contact us at Latham, Latham, at Madmana, Madmana Studios.com. All rights reserved. Copyright 2026.